If you were being hunted by a baby-stealing demon that was after your unborn child, what would you do? This ancient evil is starving for a kid's meal, and not the kind that comes with a free toy. I'm here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the demon ABYZOU in The Offering. This dad-to-be is about to make a mistake that will cost him more than just his career. Alone in his ruined apartment, Jewish scholar Yosila Fishbein performs a dark ritual. He grabs a chicken and slices its neck with a sacrificial dagger before casting it into a fire. Taking its ashes from the bucket, he scatters them in a circle around himself and reaches for a book on the floor, when suddenly an unseen force pulls it into the shadows. Yosila starts reciting an incantation, but the words on the page begin to run like blood, and just then, a creepy dead-looking girl emerges from the darkness laughing at him. She slowly walks towards him but stops, unable to fully cross the circle of ashes. She tells Yosila that he must feed her if he ever wants to see his wife again, but he refuses, and she walks away, saying that there are always others. At the last moment, Yosila gives in, and the demon promises him an exchange of life for life. He steps out of the circle and kneels on the ground, and in an instant, his head is yanked back as the demonic force floods his body. Suddenly, Yosila draws the sacrificial dagger from his back pocket. The demon roars and he collapses forward, clutching at a blue crystal necklace which burns his hands at the touch. Yosila falls to the ground, writhing in pain, and finally dies. That makes one victim down, with 5 more to go. The next morning, young married couple Arthur and Claire arrive at Arthur's dad's house for a stayover visit. Claire says she's nervous because his father's strong religious commitments have made her feel unwelcome in the past, but Arthur promises her that this time he'll be more inviting, especially because she's pregnant with his only grandchild. She agrees to give things another chance, and the two of them head inside. The house also serves as a Jewish funeral parlor, and Arthur and Claire walk in on the memorial of a young girl who had recently gone missing. His father Saul welcomes them in, giving them each a hug before taking them upstairs to show them around. Later that evening, the three of them sit around the dinner table catching up. Arthur's phone rings, and Saul looks at him disapprovingly, but he excuses himself to take the call in another room. He's secretly at risk of losing their house due to financial trouble, and plans to sell his dad's house in order to get out of it. The caller tells Arthur that if he doesn't get his dad's signature by the end of the week, the bank will foreclose on his home. Back in the kitchen, Claire notices the picture of the young girl whose funeral was earlier that day and asks Saul what happened to her. He tells her that her name was Sarah Scheindel, and she was finally found after being missing for several days, but spares her the gory details. Arthur comes back to the table, and the three of them toast to new beginnings. The doorbell rings, and Saul's good friend and assistant Hamish arrives with the body of Yosila Fishbein. Saul asks Arthur if he'd like to help, and they take the elevator down to the morgue in the basement. Hamish grills Arthur on the reason for his sudden visit. Suspicious of his intentions, Saul unzips the body bag, asking Hamish what happened, and he says that Yosila took his own life. Hamish mentions hearing rumors that Yosila began studying the occult after his wife died. They pray over Yosila, and when they're finished, the two of them go out for a cigarette, leaving Arthur alone to work on the body and warning him not to mess up. Arthur opens the bag further and notices the dagger protruding from Yosila's chest. Disgusted, he grabs the handle and yanks out the knife, tossing it into the sink. He then cuts open Yosila's blood-soaked shirt with a pair of scissors, revealing the stab wound and blue crystal amulet. Arthur tries to remove the necklace but can't unlock the clasp, so he uses the scissors to cut the string. Just as he does, the body's eyes shoot open, startling him, and the man drops the necklace on the floor, where it shatters into several pieces. The lights go out all over the neighborhood, but turn on again just as Saul and Hamish come to see what happened. Hearing them coming, Arthur panics and kicks the broken pieces of the amulet down the drain. Suddenly, the body convulses on the table, as if coming back to life, scaring Arthur, but Saul says that it's just going through rigor mortis. He goes to the sink and notices the sacrificial dagger, picking it up and carefully reading the inscriptions on its handle. Growing concerned, he sends Arthur up to check on Claire and get some sleep, saying that they'll get back to work in the morning. Arthur leaves and Saul goes back for the knife, reading its handle a second time. He has no idea that his son has accidentally released an ancient demon. Okay, I know it's tempting to sweep your mistakes under the rug, or in this case down the drain, but that's not the best idea when you're talking about shattering an amulet with a baby-stealing demon sealed inside. It looks like Yosila made the classic conjurer's mistake of summoning an ancient evil beyond his ability to understand or control. The signs are all there: creepy drawings on the walls, sigils carved into the floor, chickens being sacrificed with a ritualistic dagger. It doesn't take a trained exorcist to see that this guy was summoning a demon. A dead girl emerging from the darkness, and demanding that you feed her is never a good sign. She may not be able to harm Yosilla while he's in the protective circle, but as soon as he steps out of it, he's immediately engulfed by the evil spirit. The only thing left for him to do is another ritual with the sacrificial blade, which seems to stop the possession from fully taking hold. Based on everything we've seen so far, it's safe to say we're dealing with some kind of demonic entity that is now sealed within Yosilla's blue stone pendant. It was a close call, but as long as nobody breaks that necklace, everything should be fine. So along comes Arthur, who shatters the necklace. That didn't take long. Talk about being a disappointment. Saul and Hamish left him alone for less time than it takes to smoke a cigarette, and he already released an ancient demon from its prison. I understand that he's embarrassed, and he should be, but that's about to be the least of his worries. Arthur doesn't realize it yet, but that was no ordinary necklace, and knowing that Yosilla was secretly dabbling in the occult, I would have been extremely careful not to touch or destroy any jewelry that I found on his body. If Arthur had just been honest with his father and Hamish about what happened, they would have noticed the written seal inside of the necklace and realized that something was wrong right away. But the thing about Arthur is, he doesn't make very good decisions, and you're about to see what I mean. Upstairs, Arthur hears a strange noise from the hallway behind him. He walks around looking for the source but finds nothing. Peering inside the bathroom, he's suddenly overcome by a sharp pain and ringing noise in his head. He's extremely disoriented, but it only lasts for a moment, and Arthur goes back into the bedroom with the door closing shut behind him on its own. Early the next morning, Claire wakes up and peeks around the room. She tries to wake up Arthur, but he doesn't respond. Claire gets out of bed and goes to the bathroom, but while she's fixing her hair, the bedroom door slowly opens on its own. She goes back to the bedroom and turns off the bathroom lights, but the lights click back on again. She turns around to investigate, and a demonically possessed Yosilla bursts from behind the door and tackles her onto the bed, digging his claws into her stomach. Suddenly, Claire wakes up with a gasp. Apparently, it was just a horrific nightmare. She checks on the baby and breathes a sigh of relief before getting up. But in the reflection of the mirror, there's blood on the mattress where she was sleeping. Saul sits in his office, carefully reading the words on the knife. Stumped, he calls his friend Chaim for help. Chaim tells him that the writing is one of God's hidden names written backwards, an ancient wording inscription for invoking demons and sealing them in a body. He assures Saul that it's nothing to worry about, saying that nobody in the modern world has the skills to actually summon a demon, and even if they did, there would have been a pendant on the body to seal the demon in. Saul didn't see the pendant before Arthur kicked it down the drain, so he tells Chaim that all he found was the knife. Chaim says that even if Yosilla was possessed by a demon, the most it can do is mess with their heads unless somebody burns the body. They hang up. But Saul isn't convinced. Down in the morgue, Saul takes Yosilla's body out and begins working on him again. He looks at the dagger wound in his chest and notices black veins radiating out from it. Saul opens Yosilla's eyes and it looks like he's staring directly at him. He goes to get his records, and when he comes back, he sees that Yosilla is now staring straight up at the ceiling. He covers the body with a sheet and slides it back into the freezer, marking it as ready for burial. Upstairs in the kitchen, Claire notices a creepy hand disappear behind a partition at the end of the hall. She calls out for whoever is there, but sees nothing. Looking back through her camera, she sees the feet of a young girl dangling under the partition, but when she looks without the camera, they're gone. She decides to record a video of the hallway, and when she plays it back, she hears demonic whispering in the background. Suddenly, she hears a scream and jumps in fright, dropping the camera and shattering its screen. Okay, they might think it's all in their heads right now, but they have no idea how much trouble they're really in. When Arthur goes to investigate the strange noise in the hallway, he's assaulted with a sudden intense ringing in his ears. In medical terms, this is referred to as tinnitus and is associated with a number of causes, including ear infections and severe feelings of stress. But some religious communities also identify it as an early warning sign of demonic possession. Arthur is under a lot of stress with the pressure of losing his home, but after breaking that pendant earlier, it's safe to say he has bigger things to worry about. If the bedroom door closing by itself is any indication, my money's on demonic possession for this one. When Claire is attacked in her dreams by zombie Yosilla, he lunges at her from behind a mirror, which some Jewish cultures believe spirits can use to move between worlds. In the morning, blood can be seen in the mirror's reflection where she was sleeping, indicating that something horrible may be happening to her unborn baby. I know she wants to make a good impression with Saul, but a nightmare that bad during my first night sleeping over at an actual funeral home would have me booking a hotel room first thing in the morning. You'd think that Saul's friend Chaim would take finding a ritualistic dagger in the body of their former colleague a bit more seriously. Chaim tells Saul that the writing on the dagger is meant to seal a demon in a body, but not to worry about it unless he also found a pendant on the corpse. But what did they think this guy was doing if he wasn't summoning a demon? Chaim knows that he was experimenting with occult practices before, so why is he so sure that a demon wasn't involved? If I were Saul, I'd still be very concerned, especially after noticing black veins radiating out from the knife knife wound, and catching Oscilla giving me the evil eye from beyond the grave. Claire has her second demonic encounter when she sees ghostly feet dangling from behind the partition in the hall. Based on the shoes, it looks like a young girl, specifically the same one who was tormenting Oscilla before he died. Claire doesn't know what was up with Oscilla yet, but she does know that a funeral for a girl was just held in that house the day before. It should be obvious to Claire that she's dealing with a ghost at best, or some sort of demonic entity at worst, and it's a well-established fact that spooky ghost girls are always the most dangerous kind. I'd rather take on a ghost pirate or spirit of a dead coal miner any day before coming up against one of these. And if I were Claire, I'd be getting the hell out of there fast. Claire records the hallway with her camera and then plays back the audio. A classic ghost hunting move. Most ghosts are usually hard to hear, but this one tried to make Claire hard of hearing, and after an encounter like that, I would be seriously reconsidering my vacation plans. Meanwhile, Arthur finishes up business with a client when Hamish hears his phone ringing and decides to answer it. The caller asks for Arthur, but Hamish tells him that he's his assistant and asks if he can take a message. He says that he won't be getting the loan he applied for unless they have his father's house as collateral, and they need him to sign the contract tonight or risk losing the deal. Hamish says he'll let him know and hangs up the phone. Later that night, Saul stands in the dining room singing in Hebrew to a picture of his dead wife. Claire shows up dressed in traditional clothing and he welcomes her in. Just then, Hamish storms in, shouting that Arthur plans to sell the house out from under him. He hands Saul the paperwork and Arthur reaches for it, but Saul shouts at him and smacks his hand away. Arthur runs out of the room, leaving his father behind, heartbroken and betrayed. He asks Claire if she knew about this, but she only stares at him speechless. Arthur runs to the bedroom and starts packing his bags, but Claire angrily asks him what's going on. He confesses that he hasn't sold a house in 2 years and that they need to refinance their home. Claire is furious that he's been lying to her for so long and that she quit her job and got pregnant when they weren't financially stable. She asks him if he saw how it affected his father, and Arthur slams the bedroom door shut. He tells her that he watched his mother slowly die in that house and all his father did was tell him to go pray. He says that he cried to God every day, but nothing could save her. Claire tells him that he needs to talk to his dad or he'll regret it forever, and Arthur says that he's sorry. Later, Arthur takes the elevator down to the morgue and finds his father praying over the contract and taking his heart medication, clearly in extreme distress. Arthur can't bear to confront him and instead walks away. Alone in the morgue, Saul hears a noise and thinks that it's Arthur. The lights flicker and the curtain blows, even though no windows are open. Saul gets up to investigate when suddenly the doors begin to swing and the silhouette of a massive demon appears behind them. The lights go out as the demon gets closer and Saul runs for the elevator. He grabs a lamp and turns it on, only to see the goat-like head of the demon bearing down on him. The bulb bursts, and Saul begins to pray as the demon stands over him, but he's so terrified that he has a heart attack and dies. That makes 2 victims down, with 4 more to go. Okay, it looks like the morgue just got 1 more customer, but now that the funeral director is dead, who's going to sign the paperwork? Hamish really has Arthur pinned for the disappointment that he is. I would almost feel like we're being too hard on Arthur, but let's remember that he planned to sell his family home to cover up for his failures as a real estate agent, and not to mention released an ancient evil from its eternal prison. Hamish was totally right to expose him, even if his methods were a bit unethical. Arthur had plenty of opportunities to step up and approach his dad about his financial troubles, and I'm sure Saul would have helped him out, but he'd rather hide from his problems than face them, and it's about to cost him more than just his home. Arthur and Saul clearly have a troubled relationship. On the one hand, it's obvious that they love each other, but on the other, it seems like Arthur grew up feeling an emotional disconnect with his dad, and that's affected his ability to approach him about tough situations as an adult. Some religious communities believe that Arthur's feelings of guilt, old emotional wounds, and doubt in God make him highly susceptible to spiritual attack. Their belief is that when the spirit is weakened by these feelings, it's easier for a demonic entity to slip in and take over your mind. In order to take back control, you need to get some rest, face the things that are troubling you, and focus on the good things in life. Arthur can't break himself out of the cycle and ends up falling deeper into the demon's trap. Saul is the first person in the family to experience a full-on attack by the demon. Being alone in the morgue late at night when suddenly the lights go out and a 10-foot-tall hell beast appears is horrifying to say the least. But it's important to remember that at this stage, the demon can't actually hurt you physically. From Saul's conversation with Chaim earlier, we know that the only power the demon has is to mess with your mind. If the demon can only attack me from my own imagination, then she's really not much of a threat, and this whole encounter isn't any more dangerous than watching a scary movie. You might as well grab some popcorn and enjoy the show. This demon happened to pick on a guy who was already on heart medication, and I would hardly consider that fair play. Saul didn't deserve to go out like this, and unfortunately, the nightmare is just getting started. The next morning, Arthur wakes up and goes looking for his dad, but is shocked to find him dead in the morgue, lying on the table, surrounded by Hamish and the others. Arthur stutters out a confused what happened, and one of the onlookers tells him that his heart gave up, but Hamish shoves the signed contract into Arthur's face, blaming him for breaking his father's heart. Arthur asks for a minute with his father alone, and everyone leaves the room. He takes the wedding ring from his father's finger and cries in regret over what he's done. Below him in the drain, the shattered blue pendant still lurks just out of sight. Upstairs, the mirrors in the parlor are covered with sheets as a crowd gathers for Saul's funeral service, while Arthur sits speechless in his chair. Chaim arrives and asks Hamish some questions, curious why the seemingly healthy Saul suddenly dropped dead, but Hamish is too heartbroken to answer. Hamish stands up and begins to chant in grief right in Arthur's face, but he stares blankly straight ahead, his left hand moving as if he's possessed. Suddenly, Arthur snaps back into consciousness and runs out of the room, leaving behind a demonic symbol carved into the chair. Arthur runs upstairs to the bedroom and the door slams shut on its own behind him. And when he goes to investigate, the mezuzah hanging there splits in half, and he stares at it frozen in horror. Downstairs in the kitchen, Claire puts something in the refrigerator, and when she closes the door, she sees the ghost of Sarah Scheindel standing right there. The girl runs into the next room and Claire follows her, where she hides behind a sheet that covers one of the mirrors. Suddenly, the girl disappears, and when Claire pulls back the sheet, nobody is there. She turns around, and that's when she realizes that everyone else in the home is frozen in time. She looks back at the mirror, and in the reflection, they're all moving normal. But when she looks again, Sarah is standing there among them. Claire asks the girl what she wants, and the sheet falls over her head. She quickly pulls it off, but Sarah is directly in front of her and screams, "Help me," before disappearing. Claire screams in shock, but the room is back to normal, and she runs out embarrassed and terrified. She goes upstairs to Arthur, who's still staring at the broken mezuzah on the door. Claire tries telling him that something's wrong, but he looks like he can't even hear her and walks into the bedroom without a word. She asks him what's going on, and Arthur tells her that he needs to sleep. Later that night, the hallway lights flicker and go out. Arthur suddenly wakes up and goes downstairs in a possessed state, where he carves a massive symbol in the middle of the floor. Suddenly, he regains consciousness and sees that he's kneeling in the middle of the room with the rug still covering the ground. Arthur goes upstairs and tells Claire that he thinks he's going crazy, and she says they should go home. Okay, it looks like Arthur's taking a night class in demonic woodworking, and his first project is one hell of a job. At Saul's funeral, Arthur goes into a full-blown panic attack. While his spirit is weak from the shock of losing his father, the demon seems to take an even stronger hold of his mind and possesses him into carving some sort of emblem into the arm of the chair. He runs up to the bedroom to gather his thoughts, but the demon slams the door shut and breaks the mezuzah that's hanging there. A mezuzah is a piece of parchment inscribed with specific verses from the Torah, which Jewish families affix to the doorways of living spaces in their house. They are meant to remind the family of their commitment to God, and some believe that they also protect the home from evil spirits. The mezuzah in Arthur's bedroom door breaking shows that the spirit has become more powerful in the physical realm after taking the life of his father. It's safe to say that things are getting worse by the minute, and Arthur better start finding some spiritual help fast before he's completely succumbed to the demon's will. Claire's next encounter with the demon shows its power increasing yet again. This time, the demon is able to freeze the world around Sarah and trap her in some sort of mirror dimension for a brief moment. Speaking of mirrors, we see that every mirror in the house has been covered with a sheet. In some Jewish cultures, it's customary to cover all mirrors in the home for 7 days of mourning after the death of a close family member. Some do this to emphasize the importance of inward reflection during this time, instead of focusing on outer beauty. But there's also the belief that evil spirits and demons try to attack families who are in mourning, and the mirrors act as doorways for them to cross over from the other side. The demon leads Claire right to the mirror and tricks her into pulling off the sheet, effectively opening up another portal for it to invade the home. When she looks into the mirror, the demon is able to take hold of her mind and begin to influence the world around her in horrifying ways. If I were Claire, the last thing I would do would be to follow the creepy ghost girl around the house, playing hide and seek. Late that night, Arthur dreams of carving a massive demonic emblem into the floor of the foyer. My question is, when he regained consciousness kneeling in the middle of the room, why didn't he pull up the rug to check if what he dreamed was real? If I was suspicious that a demonic entity was possessing me and using me as a minion to do its bidding, that would be something I would want to confirm as soon as possible. Arthur seems to be satisfied with the conclusion that he's going crazy, but I sure wouldn't be. And one look under that rug might have been all the proof I needed to contact the professionals. Arthur always wants to hide from his problems instead of confronting them, but if he lets this go on for much longer, it's only a matter of time before the demon takes total control. In the morning, a group of men arrive to pick up Yosilla's body, but get angry when they see that Arthur doesn't have the correct paperwork prepared. They ask to see Hamish, but Arthur tells them that he doesn't work there anymore. They say to transport the body, he'll either need police clearance or to transfer it to the next of kin, and suggests that he puts their differences aside and calls Hamish for help. Arthur opens the dead man's file and finds his house keys, and decides to go there to see if he can find any information about his family. Arthur arrives at Yosilla's apartment and lets himself in. He calls out to see if anyone's there, but gets no answer. The man tries to turn on the lights, but the power is out. He creeps from room to room, noticing strange drawings all over the walls, candlelit shrines, and a library overflowing with books and notes on demonic rituals. On the typewriter, he finds Yosilla's final message, "Forgive me." He rummages through some drawers and finds a cassette tape labeled Summoning Attempt Number 5. Arthur lets one of the tapes play while clearing out some books on the floor and discovers a sigil just like the one from his vision carved into the wood. On the tape, he hears Yosilla saying that he's made a terrible mistake and accidentally summoned the demon ABYZOU, the taker of children. Arthur pulls up a floorboard and finds a VHS tape labeled The Miracle of Sarah Scheindel. He plays the tape and sees Yosilla saying that he has found the cure for death and plans to use it to bring back his wife. The man steps back from the camera, revealing Sarah standing next to a ring of candles. He says that the Archangel wants them to begin, and Sarah steps into the circle and begins to levitate. She laughs at first, but Yosilla notices that something is wrong. Suddenly, he's thrown across the room by an unseen force, and Sarah shrieks in pain before falling to the ground. Yosilla crawls across the floor as the demon appears and approaches him, but then the film cuts out. That's when Arthur's phone rings and it's Claire. After being scared by a harsh knock at the door, Claire found Ada Fishbein there wanting to see her husband's body. She tries to ask Arthur about it, but the call reception is bad and they can't hear each other. The woman turns around and Ada is standing right behind her. She begs Claire to let her see her husband, and Claire finally agrees. In the elevator, Ada creepily rubs Claire's pregnant belly and says that it shouldn't be too much longer before the baby is born. Ada knows exactly which body to go to without needing to read the labels and asks Claire to open the freezer. When she does, Claire realizes that it's the same man who attacked her in her dream. Suddenly, Claire falls to the ground in pain, and Ada tells her that she's been infected and will lose the baby unless she breaks the curse. Ada points to the drain and tells Claire to grab the broken pendant and burn it. Claire takes the pendant and holds it over a candle, lighting the written seal on fire, and as she does, Yosilla's corpse bursts into flames. Behind him, Ada transforms into the goat-headed demon ABYZOU and roars at Claire, who runs for the elevator. The lights go out and Claire pulls the elevator gate closed, but when she reaches for the button, the demon lunges through at her with its claw. Luckily, the elevator doors shut just in time and Claire escapes for the moment. Okay, things have officially gone from bad to worse, and ABYZOU's plan is going off without a hitch. Is Arthur the first guy to go check out Yosilla's apartment, or am I missing something? Somebody had to go and find his body, right? Did they not notice the obvious signs that he summoned a demon? Or did they just not think that it was something worth mentioning? Earlier, Hamish mentioned rumors that Yosilla was dabbling in the occult, but I would say that those rumors are certainly confirmed. This guy's whole apartment looks like what a Hot Topic wants to be when it grows up. Seriously, after just walking through the door, I'd need to double check that this apartment belonged to Yosilla and not Charles Manson. And that's before I found the tapes explaining all of the demonic exposition. On the summoning attempt tape, Arthur finally learns the demon's name is ABYZOU, the taker of children. ABYZOU is said to wander the earth looking for pregnant women and causing them to miscarriage. Some believe that she's jealous of the mother because she herself is infertile and cannot give birth. ABYZOU is known to strangle newborns and can also be the cause of deafness, blindness, insanity, and intense bodily pain. Given that Claire is heavy with child, she's the perfect target for ABYZOU's wrath. Arthur learns more about Yosilla's experiment and how the demon came to be when he watches the VCR tape of Sarah's sacrifice. So now we've got a message on a typewriter, a cassette tape, and a VCR recording. Does Yosilla own any appliances created in the last 3 decades or what? I guess he's too busy summoning demons to keep up with modern technology. And truth be told, a thumb drive just wouldn't feel creepy enough, so I'll let it slide. On the tape, Arthur sees Yosilla sacrifice Sarah to ABYZOU and learns that his ultimate goal was to resurrect his dead wife, but that he accidentally summoned the wrong entity in the process. Now that Arthur knows exactly what's going on, he can finally make some educated decisions while fighting back. But unfortunately, the demon is already several steps ahead. Back at the house, the demon arrives in the form of Yusilla's wife, Ada, demanding that Claire take her down to the morgue to see the body. Claire doesn't know that Ada is actually dead yet, so it's understandable that she isn't immediately suspicious of an old lady who seems to be there just to see the body of her husband. The only warning sign so far that something about her isn't normal was the powerful knock at the door. It's extremely unusual for a little old lady to be knocking so hard, and that alone would have made me suspicious of her right away. Claire tries to call Arthur for advice, but the demon disrupts their call, and having no reason not to go along with her, Claire takes Ada down to the morgue. When they get down there, Ada immediately knows which fridge the body is in, and there's no way she was able to read the list so fast. When Claire takes out the body, she realizes that it's the same man who attacked her in her dream, and at this point, it's time to confront this old lady. That would be the absolute last sign that I needed that she could not be trusted, and I would have run to the elevator and locked her down in the basement until Arthur got home, and I could figure out what was going on. Ada tells Claire that she's been infected and points her directly to the pendant laying at the bottom of the drain. I know Claire is not thinking clearly at this point, but how on earth could this woman have known the pendant would be there unless she's some kind of supernatural entity? She tells Claire to burn the pendant, which we all know by now is exactly what the demon wants. But unfortunately, Claire has no idea and lights the necklace on fire, finally releasing the demon from its prison and allowing it to cross over into the physical world. Claire runs upstairs and hides under the kitchen table, which obviously is not enough to hide her from a demon, and she's quickly caught. Now it's all up to Arthur to make the right moves and save the day, but based on his track record so far, I don't have very high hopes. Arthur bursts in looking for Claire, but finds Sarah there instead. He sees Claire slumped on the couch looking dead and runs to her, but she wakes up gasping for air. Arthur picks her up and runs for the door, but on the other side, he finds himself right back where he started, and Claire has vanished. He runs into the next room and finds Sarah and Claire there again. The demon repeats the phrase "a life for a life," and Arthur grabs Claire and runs for the door a second time, but the situation only repeats itself. Arthur enters the parlor for the third time, but this time Claire is gone, and ABYZOU asks if he wants to make a deal. She points to the window, and Arthur looks out at the kids playing in the snow, suddenly realizing what she means. The demon wants Arthur to sacrifice a child to save his wife and baby. He refuses, and the demon pierces his mind with an intense ringing sound, causing him to reel in pain. But when it finally ends, she's gone. Arthur pulls at his phone, knowing he has only one option left, and calls Hamish for help. Hamish arrives at the house and watches the tape, and he does not like what he sees. Arthur asks him what they can do, and Hamish says he knows a person to call, Saul's old friend, the scribe Chaim. Chaim arrives and immediately walks to the demonic carving in the center of the floor. Hamish asks him what it is, and Chaim explains that it's a sigil that serves as a sacrificial altar for the demon. He asks Arthur if Claire went to the sigil and fed the demon, but Arthur doesn't know. He asks to see Yusilla's body. The three of them go down to the basement, where they see Yusilla's burnt remains, and Chaim says the demon has been freed. Finding the broken pendant, he quickly begins repairing it. While he's working, Chaim explains that in ancient times, the demon ABYZOU preyed on the desperate, forcing them to feed it. God called upon Abraham to sacrifice his son, binding ABYZOU forever until Yusilla set it free once again. He warns the demon will make you see and feel things that aren't real until it finally gets a child inside of the sigil. They can trap it once again with the pendant, but it will require Arthur to sacrifice himself like Yusilla did. Chaim says there's no other way, and that Arthur must complete the entire ritual and stay in the protective circle at all costs. Suddenly, the morgue door swings open, and in an instant, Chaim's neck is broken and he falls to the floor dead. That makes 3 victims down with 3 more to go. Arthur and Hamish look up just in time to see the demon standing in front of them before the lights explode. Hamish grabs the jar of Yusilla's ashes, and the two of them run for the elevator. Upstairs, Arthur begins spreading the ashes in a protective circle when suddenly Hamish disappears. He looks up and sees dead dad crying out for him, but Hamish grabs him by the shoulder and pulls him out of the vision just in time. He gives Arthur his father's Torah and wraps the pendant around his neck. But just as Arthur is finishing the circle, the demon crawls across the wall and attacks Hamish, dragging him out of the room. Arthur can't see what happens, but it sounds like Hamish is violently killed. Arthur begins to pray, and the demon growls at him from the darkness. Suddenly, Claire appears in the next room, but the door is quickly slammed shut, and it sounds like she's being killed. Overwhelmed by the horror he's experiencing, Arthur steps forward out of the circle, and a piercing sound immediately causes him to recoil in pain. He bursts into the foyer and sees Claire being sucked out of a second-floor window. She screams to Arthur for help, but there's no way he can reach her, and to make matters worse, the words in his Torah begin to smear from the demonic presence. Arthur closes his eyes and starts praying from memory, really putting his soul into it. He finishes the prayer, and in an instant, his head is thrown back as ABYZOU enters his body, just like Yusilla. Arthur crawls for the knife, but the demon yanks it out of his hands and throws it across the room. He tries to get the knife again, but there's no way he can make it, and he collapses on the floor. At the last moment, Hamish appears, injured but alive, and hands the knife to Arthur. He can't do it alone, and Hamish helps Arthur plunge the knife into his his chest. He falls over and tells Claire that he loves her with his dying breaths, but Hamish menacingly says, "You should have stayed in the circle." Arthur looks back and sees the pendant laying on the floor in the next room. He wasn't wearing the necklace, and that means that the trap didn't work. ABYZOU is still free. The demon smugly gets up and walks away, revealing the real Hamish dead on the floor with his signature toothpick shoved in his eye. Realizing that he's failed, Arthur dies. That makes 5 victims down with 1 more to go. Okay, where's the holy hand grenade when you need it? They had their clash, but it looks like Arthur fought the demon and the demon won. The final battle is over, and as predicted, Arthur let his family down once again. When Arthur tries to escape with Claire, he finds himself trapped in a time loop and unable to get away. ABYZOU offers him the classic demon's bargain of a life for a life, and insinuates that it wants Arthur to feed it one of the neighborhood children, in exchange for his family's safety, which Arthur of course refuses to do, but maybe he should have considered it. I'm sure there has to be at least one bad kid in that neighborhood who nobody likes. Maybe he'd be doing everyone a favor by getting rid of them, even though there's certainly no guarantee that the demon will keep its word. If all we have to do is sacrifice one little twerp, then it couldn't hurt to try. Plus, if it does work out, you can end up with an ancient spirit that will do your bidding in exchange for the occasional sacrifice. I would have done some asking around the neighborhood to see which kid all the others liked the least, and put them right at the top of my list for a potential sacrifice if I couldn't solve things another way. Hamish and Chaim insist that the only solution is for Arthur to sacrifice himself, and if that's the best they can do, then I'm sorry, but little Timmy down the street is going to be missing school tomorrow. But Arthur decides to go through with their plan, and of course he can't even get that right. There are 2 important things that we know going into this fight. The demon wants Arthur out of the protective circle so it can kill him. And second, the demon will show them anything to get the baby inside the sigil. All Arthur needs to do is stay inside of the circle and complete the ritual, and the demon will be banished and his baby will be saved. Not 5 minutes go by in the battle before ABYZOU makes it seem like Claire's being brutally killed, and tricks Arthur into stepping out of the circle. At that exact moment, it distracts him with the piercing sound and knocks the pendant off of his neck. Arthur only realizes too late that he's fallen right into the demon's trap and sacrificed himself without sealing it in. I bet he's regretting not sacrificing a kid, but it's too late now, and it looks like the demon will be having his family for dinner. Suddenly, Claire wakes up under the kitchen table gasping for air. The sun shines through the windows and she cautiously gets up to look around. She walks to the foyer and sees Arthur, and they run to each other. He touches her stomach, asking if the baby's okay, and Claire looks down at her feet, realizing that she's standing right in the middle of the sigil. She looks up in horror, but it's too late. The demon ABYZOU lunges at her, claiming its final victim. That makes 6 down with no survivors.
But what do you think? How would you beat the offering? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. Check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. And don't forget that from now on, we'll be uploading on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Until next time, have a damn good day.